G'day and welcome to the Off-Chain Podcast. Don here with you. Our guests today are Richard Shorten and Tom Chaffee, co-founders of GlobalStake, the institutional-grade digital asset staking service for institutional investors, custodians, and exchanges. Epic chat with Richard and Tom discussing why we need institutional staking service, why bare metal matters. If you don't know what that is, or why it's important, this is the show for you, and how we can create cross-chain yield-bearing products using digital assets. I mean, we're going to talk about so many things today. It's a great and wide-ranging conversation with Tom and Rich. Let's dive in. How did you get into crypto? How did you get into staking? Tell us a little bit about your origin story. Maybe Rich, if we start with you.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll tell a joint origin story, which Tom will not want me to tell, but will make it a lot more interesting, right? So Tom and I actually met about 20 years ago when Tom was the erstwhile CEO of a public company. He actually ended up being like the last man standing in a tricky situation. I was very involved in technology, deal making, etc. Met Tom. We started to work together. We were able to work through that company and actually Tom ended up selling it to a couple of Fortune 500 companies, like in two pieces. And during that process, I learned that Tom was actually at that time a rock star who was actually recovering, becoming a software entrepreneur. He'll tell you that part of the story because I'm not going to let him away without it. And then we worked on things together, just various projects along the way. As I mentioned, that there was a company that I sold in 2019 that sort of gave me a lot more time to focus on crypto. A lot of my background was in telecom. I was very involved in a lot of telecom infrastructure, early days of the internet companies and projects sort of from the period of late 90s to 2010. That was during the period where I intersected with Tom. And so my telecom background informed a lot of my viewpoint on crypto. And in 2020, raised a small fund to focus on sort of early stage stuff, looking at crypto, so just dug in and tried to learn things, and pretty quickly realized that infrastructure was an area that matched well with my experience set, my relationships, and I just fundamentally believed that whichever blockchain you think is going to win, or however many blockchains you think there are going to be, you need flashing lights in a data center someplace to support all of this, right? Like it requires infrastructure, it requires decentralized infrastructure, and I believed that it required a different approach to infrastructure than Google, AWS, and the hyperscalers typically provided in the space to the other companies that work in Web3 infrastructure.
Yep. And you had to bring up the rockstar stuff. So, so Don, my beginning of life and the way I got into software development was actually through music. I was a touring musician, and actually today was a pretty tough day for me. Brian Wilson, whom I worked with for nearly a decade, the founder of the Beach Boys, passed today. Wow. So it's been kind of a self-reflective day for me, to be honest with you. And I toured and worked with a whole bunch of names you've heard of, or if you're young, never heard of. So effectively, it was really interesting. Our entry into the space, as Rich really highlighted, was to how do you enter a space? And he's like, I'm loving this blockchain stuff. He got a year advance on me while I was cleaning up one of our other enterprises, and I came in. I'm like, this is just a bunch of slow public databases. How is that big? Be excited, Yeah. And so I had no way of determining what was real, what was not, right? It's a Wild West, which was the exciting part. But to us, having the picks and shovels and making sure that we understood that you didn't have to make any directional bet on any given asset, that if you do it right and you create an enterprise that has durability, and that in this space is staking and Web3 infrastructure, and you do that piece truly correctly, you're going to have a business that outlasts any given, meme coin and or whatever, right? So that's why we focused on doing things differently, completely different. Like we're bare metal all the way, right? As Rich said, zig when everybody else is zagging. And we chose to say, you know what? Let's build bespoke hardware for each individual blockchain that makes it work better. Right? Let's understand the interaction of the software and the hardware. Let's make sure that the hardware and the networks and everything you provide are doing it differently and bespoke for that specific chain. And that's kind of how we began to approach this.
So, Tom, that sounds like a far cry from touring musician to how do we think about bare metal infrastructure for crypto, blockchains?
Yep.
Was this was Rich talking about this new blockchain thing and you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't really interest me, or it does interest me, and did he drag you in, or is that a kind of just together you were dreaming about what could we possibly do in this space, that this other endeavors finalized?
So that is great. Yeah. Rich is, either of us have been the tip of the spear in numerous activities we've done. At one time I lead, he jumps in, or one time he leads and then I jump in. This time he was leading and I'm like, what the hell? But as I dove in, you begin to understand the truly monumental nature of Web3 and the changes it could mean for everything from economies to transactions to interactions to corporate structures to people to everything that we all know. And of course, you start to get more and more excited, right? And you get more and more into it. And I think that, right now, what we're suffering for is lack of really effective use cases. They're coming, and but we're seeing them starting to happen now. And so, but like I said, in the early years, it was, wait, it's a slow public database, Rich. I can do this much faster, centralized. What's this decentralization thing, right? So that's how we ended up.
Have there been any of those early promises of blockchain when you first started getting interested that actually have materialized? Or are there any that you're frustrated that, we haven't yet been able to get that happening?
Rich, I'll let you take that one, but the answer for me is both. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, so what has materials? I think that framing this against, an older generation, right? I witnessed and was involved in the birth of Internet Infrastructure 1.0, right? Literally the creation of internet peering and the types of things that existed before the hyperscalers existed, right? And the early passing of internet traffic, et cetera. And as AWS appeared on the scene, and then as SaaS companies began to grow, and as social media began to create a use case for a lot of this infrastructure, right? Those are all the things that happened in like the 2000 to 2010 timeframe, created big acceleration for the modern day internet, right? And the truth is, between 2010 and today, or at least a couple of years ago, that didn't really change. It was just more social media companies, more apps, more stuff, whatever, right? Blockchain introduced, in my view, and I think that we're beginning to see it, a new paradigm to the use of these networks, and it presents something that's very familiar to those of us from the telecom internet infrastructure era. The things that the guys who work in our data center and the DevOps do every day is 80% the same as what they did in traditional telecom or in traditional Web 2 services. But that 20% is really different and moves really fast and has a different set of guiding principles than traditional Web 2 does, right? And those guiding principles, one of the biggest one is decentralization, right? It's sort of like there's an operating or a starting premise that no one party can be the one that conquers the world, right? And in Web 2, that's not Facebook's MO, right? That's not anyone else's MO, right? And to me, it's sort of this, the to your question specifically, so it's this embed co-opetition dynamic where you're working with competitors and counterparties all day long. That's very similar to the early birth of competitive telecom networks. I think that's one dynamic. And then the pace of evolution, because of the benefit of the last 20 years of AWS existing and social and developer tools improving, the pace of acceleration is so much faster today in anything than it was 15 or 20 years ago. And that just creates more opportunity, also puts more pressure on the infrastructure and on the companies that have to support this infrastructure, which really bringing it full circle is one of the reasons why most operators in the space, or virtually all operators in Web3 infrastructure, go to hyperscalers to support their business. Yeah. Because Amazon can do anything you want. You just got to pay them a lot, and they're not going to give you a lot of options to tune the knobs and dials yourself, right? But we want to tune the knobs and dials ourselves, and we don't want to pay a lot, right? So therefore, that's why we approached it the way we did.
How did you decide to pursue this gap in the market rather than do a family coin like a Trump, like here's a way to make money versus here's a way to make money and make things significantly better, maybe? That's not a decision that everybody, lands in the same place that you have landed. Out of all of the opportunities that you saw in blockchain, how did you decide to pursue this one?
I gave my answer. Tom's answer might be a little bit, different. I mean, in my case, look, there's number one, you go where you have knowledge and you have differentiated skills, right? I knew that I have knowledge and people and relationships and differentiated skills when it comes to operating long-haul networks, metro networks, data center infrastructure, the actual stuff that typically is reserved to the hyperscalers and AWS, right? So that sort of migrated in that direction. And second is pattern recognition. Like I've made a career out of straddling my days, or many times between my mornings spent on the board of a public company that, is traded on the New York Stock Exchange dealing with some audit issue, and the afternoon dealing with a small company that can barely make payroll and needs to figure out how to get the next $5,400 to be able to, make the tax payment alongside their payroll payment, right? And I love that sort of, dichotomy of my own life and what I do. And crypto presents this unique opportunity to collide those two, sort of as blockchain enters an institutional world, you've got this opportunity to sort of bring those two worlds together, right? The move fast and break things world, which is in the latter category, and the truly institutional requirements, which really care about business process and the ability to diligence your entire tech stack. Those are the priorities that large institutions attach to their long-term relationships.
Well said. Yeah, and I think, to build on that, outside of the muscle memory of what we've done previously and the skill sets we had, I started early on, like I ran the predecessor company to Realtor.com and built a lot of technology that was aggregating massive amounts of decentralized data. And that was MLS systems. There were hundreds of MLS systems throughout the country, which were the real estate listings that all existed in each individual county. And that aggregation process was that was actual true decentralization. And we re-centralized. And that process made me realize that the hardware and the software are two separate paths down the same product. And you can build software easily, but if you don't have hardware skills, and as Rich highlighted, the differentiation there is much more stark, because there's not a lot of guys you can just hire and say, okay, hey, listen, we're going to do X storage protocol. Now let's figure out how we do X storage call better. And how do we do X network better? And so the TikTok of hardware and software, it's just the iPhone wouldn't exist without the hardware or the software, and they keep moving each forward more and more and more. And that's, I think, from my perspective, I saw our opportunity to make an impact greater by doing it, having data centers around the world that, if AWS wakes up in a bad mood one morning and decides to shut off crypto, yeah, it won't affect us, right? We're in data centers that we control, period, full stop. So that was an important, factor for us.
Yeah, I think to do some of that age is part of it. Simply, we have the background and the people who know how to, the generation of move fast and break things developers who can accomplish fantastic things and who are great and who, many of these teams have just spectacular protocol engineers and capabilities to build things. But, many of them are, late 20s in terms of age. They've never been into a data center. They don't know what happens there, right? And we have the embed historic knowledge. Our head of infrastructure literally built Cable and Wireless's international network and data center footprint. So when you have that depth of experience, you know how to do things like literally change card A for card B in order to improve the performance on XYZ chain. And honestly, to date, many of the blockchains today, even most of the blockchains today, haven't really needed the kinds of tuning that we described. Some benefit from it a little bit, but as more and more chains move to high throughput activity and more demanding requirements, we're seeing it everywhere. And it's not just on the infrastructure, it's also on the networking. Understanding networking, understanding how and where to move a byte from here to there, understanding that latency isn't just what happens once the packet hits your server. Latency is what happens everything in between, the person clicking, send in their wallet and it hitting the server. All of those things matter. And, that's the world that our guys come from. So just that familiarity makes it a little bit easier to tackle some of these problems. It also makes it sometimes a little bit, funny because we get plenty of why the heck are they doing this kind of questions from the guys who been around the world from a long time? I heard I was on a call yesterday where one of the engineers said, "Welcome to 1994 when it comes to how we manage this protocol." In terms of the systems and the way in which you manage a diverse software application.
Why does it? Is that a preference for cloud? Is that just
what's that?
Growing up in the cloud era? Do you think people are like, "Oh, you just Amazon will take care of it"?
Fast. Yeah, easy, fast, not thinking through everything. And notably, from our perspective, the institutions are not going to be easy on this. Now, institutions are finally entering our space, right? We're within the last year, things, it's gone from a little bit fringe to lots of corporates purchasing Bitcoin, which is the start of getting hooked, as we know. And so institutional players have expectations that are not, just doing it over here and hopefully, Amazon will handle it or Google will handle it. No, you have to have your own SOC compliance, right? You have to have your own vision on how security and these types of things work. And what about, your ESG, your commitments? Hey, I want to make sure, blockchain chews up a whole lot of power. Am I hurting the environment, or is it better to do things? So these are the things that institutions go through, and so we wanted to make sure that as we were building, they could check the box, not just on the protocol, but on the entire stack, and that's where we really focus.
Yeah. What do you say then to people who say, "Well, welcome to 1994"?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. So when I said welcome to 1994, what I meant was some of our engineers, when they talk about some of these protocols that are supposedly the most advanced things out there, right? I won't mention them by name, but high profile protocols, right? They're kind of like, yeah, well, what we have to do is basically reset every now and then to make it work. And we're like, what?
Yeah.
No,
that's basically in 94. Yeah, we had back in the day, we lots of things were running on Java stacks and things like that, and horrible memory leakage issues, and it would require restarts. 11:59 every night, we're restarting the server, right? Things like that. Well, we haven't had to do that since the 90s, right? Maybe the early 2000s. But, there's a lot of protocols that are not well done, right? But they may
and the truth is they're breaking new ground, right? They're trying different things.
Right.
We're pushing boundaries. And so it is like a restart in this regard, right? And that's what's fascinating about the space is the pace of evolution, the diversity of design choices that are being made. Another thing that's sort of not said enough, but that I find, maybe I'm a bit of a masochist for this, but like the fact that crypto is such a hostile environment, it really hardens you when it comes to infrastructure and processes. And, and by hostile, I mean, it's just an inherently adversarial system, from everything down to who gets to propose the next block, up to everything in the next layer in the stack, right? And so it really sharpens thinking. Like if you're not careful, you will get hit hard, right? Somewhere, somehow, some way. And of course, it's all of our mission to try to abstract that away for end users. Crypto will not ultimately succeed until that's abstracted away from the users or the institutions trust, parties like ourselves and others, to manage that for them. But, there's just some folks, and I think that we're one of them, who like being in the middle of the gunfight. Like that's what this is, right? We had a great story with a young engineer who made a mistake once. It took about 30 seconds for the entire world to find, the server that they brought online, right? It's just like you learn from this stuff, and you develop systems to navigate it, and it's just a fantastic environment to keep you on your toes. You know what I mean? And I find that exciting. It's definitely not accounting.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. The being in it is really exciting. Perhaps the disadvantage then is if you're trying to attract institutional adoption, and then you say, well, yeah, we have to, Solana's down again. Sorry, everybody. But trust us because we're building. And I like Solana. I'm not trying to, hang crap on them specifically because, there are a lot of chains who have had similar kinds of problems. But like you say, from an insider's perspective, we see that and we say, oh, this is progress and we're getting better. And, you got to, to use a space analogy, you got to blow up a lot of rockets to be able to, colonize Mars, for example. And we're on the way. We're blowing up some rockets, different scale. And,
it's good to be around. I think that when I think about the world of telecom in 1996 was when the World Trade Organization deregulated global telecom. And so that made it possible for competitive operators to begin to build international networks and create things. And that's the era that I came into the space, literally in 1996. And the most notorious of those was WorldCom, but there are other companies like Level 3 and others that became very large. And all of the major telcos around the world either derived from the government-owned monopolies or this era in time, really. And it was such a fantastic era of learning, technology. The big transition was voice over IP networks, sort of taking over from circuit switch networks. That was the big, technological dynamic. Capital flows were insane. People were wondering how these companies were raising all this money. Very familiar to today. I'd be like, how is this AI company raising all this money? Same kind of dynamic. It was just a very, very rich era for learning and for sort of setting a foundation. And if I look at what happened, in internet infrastructure and telecom for the past 20 years, there hasn't been anything that's been truly revolutionary. There hasn't been anything that's really changed the world. I think crypto and AI enter the space now at almost the same time, at least looking at it galactically, and they change everything for these networks. And it makes it really fun to go revisit the past history and figure out what's familiar, what's not, what's the same, what's different, how can you leverage, historic skills and historic patterns. And ultimately, I think that, you can see the telecoms and others are looking around this space and they're going to start to get more and more involved. Of course, some of them, are actively involved. I just think that it's a fascinating era to see round 2 of a technological revolution in these global networks.
And history is our guide here for sure, because if you think about the evolution of computing went through these very large sort of macro cycles. And it started with one giant machine in a room, which then turned into the desktop revolution that wasn't connected. Then turned into the web, which then turned into mobile, which is now turning into AI plus crypto, right? So these macro shifts have caused massive changes in society, workflow, whether it is social media, whether it is the ability to create a newsletter on your PC, right? All these types of things shifted how we communicate. It shifted how we do commerce. and it shifts sort of the entire zeitgeist at the time that allows us to attack, the various pieces and parts of who we are in society. And so, being in the forefront of this it's exciting for a couple of old guys, to be honest with you.
And when you get into the weeds, right? When you get into the weeds of this, right? The protocol teams and the guys who run the stuff, I mean, they're at the 1 foot level, right? I get down to the 5 foot level. I'm proud of that, right? Like I am pretty deep in the weeds, and I'm talking to everybody, and I'm learning things as best I can. I'm not a dev, so I have an inherent disadvantage because I can't sit behind a command line the way Tom can. But what is happening every day for us is that the real financial institutions, nothing pejorative to the hedge funds that have been active in the space and made a lot of money on the Ethereum ICO, but they're not real financial institutions. Like, real financial institutions are regulated. They're operating with numbers that dwarf those of even the largest, hedge fund in the space, and their requirements are simply different. And they do not know the first, for the most part. There are a handful of exceptions, but they don't know the first thing about how to attack this stuff, right? And they're going to look for trusted partners that know how to navigate this diversity of objects. And one of them is protocol knowledge. That's certainly very important, right? And certainly something where there's a lot of great teams, but they want more than that. They're going to go deeper than that. As I remember a story when I was, back in the telecom days. I was on the board of a big fiber carrier, and the CEO came back to us and said they just met with Goldman Sachs about their infrastructure and how we were trying to win their business. We were successful, and he said the CTO of Goldman Sachs literally required them to unpack the entire network link down to the conduit for every route that they were delivering services to them. They wanted true diversity down to the physical wire, down the physical cable, right? And that's the way serious financial institutions handle things like diversity, handle things like, disaster recovery, et cetera, right? And those same issues are beginning to appear in the world of crypto, right? If I'm going to custody my assets with you, it's certainly affected the custodians, right? The very, we are partnered. We're lucky to be partnered with some fantastic custodians, the largest names in the space, and they're all fantastic in terms of how they're in various ways building their infrastructure to support this. It's just starting to penetrate down to, the next layer of infrastructure underneath the custodians.
I like that music.
Yeah, sorry, that was somebody trying to slap me.
No worries. Rich and Tom, because you brought it up, maybe just, I'm really keen to zoom into GlobalStake's mission. But you brought up telecoms a bunch of times already. I'm keen to just know, as an aside perhaps, are there any more great leaps to come for telecoms, or is it just now, is it just iterative, 3G becomes 5G, or, we adopt crypto, we adopt AI, or is there anything more for teleport?
Well, you're seeing it now. I mean, I think the recent announcement where T-Mobile is going to be delivering coverage over satellite, right?
Yeah.
So so we're moving from the centralization of services where people would, I'm even centralizing my coverage for my cell carrier, right? To complete ability to be walking in the Rocky Mountains or walking in the outback and being able to jump on your phone and make a phone call like you're in the middle of the city. And I believe that these next shifts, there's reasons that we're talking about data centers in space. There's reasons that we're having conversations about completely pulling apart what have been traditional networks. So I think that the next wave certainly has to do more with the availability. The way we handle availability is we have multiple data centers on multiple continents that if one goes down, the other one picks it up, but it's still connected by a wire. The true availability is going to come from, I'm producing my own energy from the sun. I have no need to buy a nuclear power plant to turn something up. I'm going to be, my wires can't get cut because I'm floating in space and delivering everything wirelessly over, high speed networks. So I think this is the turning that will come 5-ish years from now, where things will start be talking about, so is your data center at 30 degrees north of the equator or 30 degrees south of the equator? That's coming.
All right. There are things that I do agree with what Tom's saying generally. I think that I was the chairman of one of the largest fixed wireless companies in the United States 20 years ago, and it was a battle getting anybody to believe that fixed wireless was a solution that was equally as effective as fiber. And for many applications, it was. Radio costs were very high, spectrum costs were very high. I had a lunch today actually with someone from the Helium Foundation. We talked a little bit about the history of these networks, and it reminded me that even to this day, there's a big bifurcation between the wireline guys, the people who are used to fiber, and the wireless people. They're just two different worlds. They really don't commingle. And I believe that we're going to see more and more network proliferation by wireless, which can equal mobile, which can equal decentralization, which is being driven by early projects like Helium and some new projects. There's a great one on Solana called Dawn that is fantastic, that are trying to create democratized access to this entire technical stack that is really complex. That there's like the joke about the phone company, right? This big monopolistic thing. Like, I think it's beginning to be unbundled. Now, it's a lot easier to dream about that than it is to deliver services that are meeting the same QoS standards as the major telecoms. Like, that's really hard to do. But I admire these projects that are trying hard to try to peel off pieces of it, and deliver solutions as I think the entire OSI stack becomes more and more unbundled. I think that is going to happen. I do think it's possible, and I do think over our time it's going to occur in pretty meaningful ways.
As a couple of people with massive history and expertise in that arena, how do you stay focused on GlobalStake and not get sucked into the massive opportunity that exists? Like when you meet with someone from Helium, you're like, oh man, I'm imagining, and all the synapses are going all at once, going, oh, there's so much we could do, and all these people we could talk to, and etc. And you say,
that's partially a solution. Crypto generally, like welcome to crypto generally, right?
I think that's the nature of our business is, as infrastructure providers, we get to do that. That's part of the fun. Gotcha. We get to work with all the different protocols, all the different changes, all the that we're not just focused on making the donuts one way, right? And so our ability to flex and change and adapt, that's the part that I find the most exciting. I love, I'm dealing with a crazy founder and something on one side, all the way over to helping an institution think through how they're going to increase yield on their staking, and what's the right way to do it. How are we going to balance that? So that's the part that kind of gets me up in the morning, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's cool. I think, and you have to Tom is much better. Tom is actually one of the tools of the trade. Tom is sworn off of crypto Twitter, right? Which I can't do that. But no. Tom is if I open my flank to that, I'm toast. I will never be able to get anything done. And he constantly hears from me but you're not tuned into what's happening. And he's exactly. That's the exact point.
Oh man, okay, that is discipline. That's discipline. Yeah. Oh, well, let's focus in on GlobalStake specifically then. What is your mission? What are you ultimately hoping? I know we've touched on it a bunch along the way, but what are you ultimately hoping to affect?
Tom, you want to take that one?
Sure. The core mission is to onboard those who are not in crypto to crypto, right? From an infrastructure perspective. And that means the institutions that are out there today that need to have the comfort of working with people who have our background, who have their best interests at heart, and understand that I spent a year, for example, writing security controls and hundreds of pieces of paper in order to make their lives better, right? And so these are the types of things that, so the mission is really to ensure that we can bring those institutions into this world that we all inhabit right now in a way that makes them comfortable and makes them money. Full on. That's just what it is.
Yeah, I think that these, the beauty of blockchain, the core principle of decentralized network and staking, network emissions and staking infrastructure and compensating the operators and investors to the operators who support the decentralization of the network is a really fundamental principle, right? And there are a number of ways to do it, right? We've done it with the bare metal footprint. There's obviously lots of companies out there, that many of whom are focused on specific chains and doing a whole bunch of things in specific chains. Some of whom are wide and were early, and therefore, they did it with hyperscalers. What I think is beginning to what is beginning to happen is that those institutions are, the question has been recently, well, what chains do you support? What are your fees? What's your yield? What do you get on this? Like, they're very, very simplistic questions is what's existed to date in the space. And the truth is, large institutions, they're not asking about yields. It's not because they don't care about yields. It's because they know with their volume and their stake, they're going to get the best deal. It's not a question when you show up as a significant institution whether you're going to have bargaining power. That's not even something they need to talk about, right? But what they do care about, their checklist begins with, all right, obviously depending upon the jurisdiction, are you SOC compliant? No, I'm not going to talk to you. You're off the list, right? And there's just a different set of parameters and business processes. Are you insured? Do you have these other things? Like, these are different requirements, and that's what we built for. And that's, I think, what's necessary to bring these, large financial institutions into the mix. And something that Tom will tell you that we've been very vigilant about day one is that while we want to open the door to the financial institutions coming in, we do not want to lose crypto nativity, like the beauty of sort of these community-oriented networks and these other things. And it's a really delicate balance and requires a lot of nuance and understanding and diversity of team members to be able to both speak to the community lead of XYZ, meme coin foundation, and be able to talk to ETF provider, right? And within our organization, we have both of those conversations every day in those types of parts. And that's, again, part of the fun of it, right? Is having that diversity of experience. So yeah, I think that the idea of building the foundation that people didn't really pay as much attention to 2 years ago is the part that we invested in. I think we're starting to realize the benefits of that with our sort of coming out, GlobalStake's coming out more recently. We spent a lot of time, I guess in the VC world, you call it stealth mode. We weren't actually in stealth mode, but we were just quietly getting about our business, building a foundation layer that we thought was going to matter. And I think that we're beginning to get market recognition that it does matter, and it is differentiated, and it is hard to build, and it does take a fair amount of time.
And Rich, I think that one of the things that you didn't hit on, which I think is a massive differentiator, is sort of our commitment to understanding jurisdictional issues, understanding, sort of the legal bases for the things that are happening. Rich is a recovering attorney. So, he thinks very deeply about, the issues from a legal perspective for these large institutions, and they have a different approach to things. So it's not just all, we're not just optimizing for technology, we're optimizing across, multiple disciplines in order to help these people onboard into Web3.
From the earliest days, long before we had the capability to do it, and I'm proud to say on many networks, not all, but on many networks, we now have the capability to do it. We had a mission internally to be able to push a button and change the physical geography of where stake was, so that companies that were regulated institutions that wanted hell or high water to have stake located in the U.S. or not located in the U.S. Right? What that being the either third rail or promised land, depending upon the era that you're looking at. Right? These are the kind of things that we built our network for, and we built our corporate structure for. And we did that because we just had the experience having done stuff like this historically, and it's beginning to matter. It's not any one of these things is not like a magic, silver bullet, right? And of course, relationships matter more than anything, and history, and the providers who've did the first generation who got big. They're certainly super capable, teams doing great things. But I think that it's just simply we're bringing something different to the mix, and it's beginning to be recognized because we had the luxury, perhaps, of approaching things from a strategic viewpoint of where the institutions would want to be, as opposed to, taking care of the needs of the institution 3 years ago, right? We were building something from the grounds up. And so, that makes us later entrance into the big boy game, but I think it makes us strategic entrance into the big boy game.
Yeah, the classic skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it is now. And that's really what we've done. That's why we've really focused on what we've built here, and why all of a sudden, people are recognizing us for what we've done, right? It's like, no, this is strategic. We were intended to be here. So that's the good part of it all.
So using your analogy then, Tom, how did you know the puck was going to be there? Was it a kind of, we hope? Was it just you did all of the work? Was it crystal balling? Was it the general vibe? How did you decide, or how did you know?
Well, just coming as the CEO of a public company, you learn really quickly the things that matter. So I spent a lot of time understanding whether that is deep technical security, risk reduction, everything that legal, every discipline that's required of a large institution. You'll have a checkbox, right? Mm-hmm. And so we knew that was going to come. Maybe a part of it was hopium, but we certainly thought that, at some point it's going to stop being forbidden in the United States, right? That it will become something. And now, we're part of some pretty big ETF launches, right? There's some pretty big things that are happening that, because of who we are and what we've done, we're right there, right? Mm.
It's actually funny. There's so if you go and look, a great part of the backstory actually is, so Tom and I, when we first decided we want to do something in blockchain, I set up the fund, and that was the first effort, but that's kind of plain vanilla stuff, right? Invest in a different kind of technology and, learn relationships, et cetera. It's kind of a straight ahead way to get involved. But as soon as we figured out there was opportunity, Tom and I actually created a development company called Lucky Friday Labs. And if you go look at our website for Lucky Friday Labs, which is the holding company for Global, or at least the company through which we own them, it looks very Web3 native. I mean, this speaks to developers and is and we've truly done all of the things in there. We've been very active in on-chain governance in some. We launched a charity NFT project. We did a whole bunch of things through that development company that are truly Web3 native, protocol level kind of things, right? GlobalStake, of course, presents a very different perspective, right? The website's kind of traditional and speaks to the world, and we had internal debates about whether we want to do that or not and how we want to approach it, but it's reflective of the mindset with which we approach the world. Like, the winners in this space are going to have to speak both languages, period. You have to be able to communicate both of them. And right now, I think there's a lot of people speaking crypto protocol, and there are not many people speaking institutional requirements, right? So at GlobalStake, we have our institutional requirements hat on more often than we do our protocol community hat.
So is this a factor of, how do you view it then? Is it competing with traditional finance? Is it just trying to parallel what they're already doing but making it better? Is it about trying to kind of absorb it and usurp it? How are you viewing that in terms of the current offerings with TradFi incumbents? maybe in particular from regulatory and a financial perspective, but also a technological perspective? Is it trying to eat their lunch? Is it trying to partner with them? How are you viewing it?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. My mental model for crypto is sort of there are essentially two categories. There's the financial asset category, Bitcoin being the most obvious, candidate falling into that category, and of course there are others like Ethereum and others trying to make a claim to the financial asset category. And then there's the technology solution category, right? Or the the composable network category, right? The internet computer side. And I really view the world divided those, into those two buckets. And I find that many people conflate the two. Buying Bitcoin and being active in cryptocurrency, in my view, are like totally different things. Like one is, to me, buying. I know there are some who hold the view that Bitcoin ultimately can become a payment system and all these other things. And actually, we're very involved at GlobalStake and also through my fund into many of the Bitcoin L2s that are being built on top of Bitcoin to enable those things to occur. So I am bullish about the technologies that will enable Bitcoin economics to be, further realized. Mm-hmm. But, most of our time is spent in the proof of stake world, of course, in these, composable networks. And I just think it's such a fertile space for disruption around everything. We've had, fertile space. I mean, clearly financial institutions realize this, that the blockchain is creating frictionless systems for payments and money transfers and transaction settlement that are radically different than the systems that they have today. And this is 100% realized. By the way, it's unclear to me whether that's going to actually translate into public token value for some of these, sure, cryptocurrencies. It's very possible that, the taboo term of private blockchain comes back, right? And like a lot of these financial institutions run their own blockchains. But that's another reason why we went to the infrastructure layer, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't need to make money by, getting paid in token emissions. We can get paid by supporting networks for large financial institutions. And there's a pretty big history of companies building themselves supporting networks for big financial institutions, right? That's not a new thing. So blockchain is, but not that kind of business. So I think that there's that element is clearly there. And that's happening every day in all sorts of ways and is going to continue. Stablecoin legislation moving through the US is going to be like kerosene on this fire. Bitcoin L2s is going to be something I think that's going to unlock a whole lot of activity, that's based upon Bitcoin and bring a whole new universe of crypto users who've been, sort of believers in Bitcoin, but not really into this, staking network kind of thing. I think some of them are going to start to, move into this other world of DeFi, et cetera. And so I'm excited about all that. And then the super fun stuff, that has yet to prove its value. We have internal jokes all the time about this, is I personally, as a recovering lawyer, think that the concepts of on-chain governance and the ability to create and manage an entire economy on-chain globally with, tooling that enables that to occur is a fascinating sort of social experiment involving real economies and real assets. And I think that there's something revolutionary that will emerge from that, sort of true economies beyond borders. And, we've only seen fits and spurts of this in different ways. And, the DAO structures didn't really work to enable this. And, much of the on-chain governance today is either purely technical or really not governed, it's really not democratized, controlled by a small handful of people. But the workflows are starting to evolve, and I think there's some really exciting stuff that's going to happen in that governance design space. And truly, if you want to get out of the world of the regulators, like that's how you do it, right? Governance is truly decentralized. Governance is going to be undeniable, as and when we see it.
Yeah, Rich, people were saying that back in 2017, 18. I remember that was the big hype. Decentralized governance is going to be amazing. And everyone was trying to do it. And like I say, DAOs popping up all over the place. And then it kind of Kaiser Soze and kind of disappeared off everybody's radar. And even people taking it off of their roadmaps.
The idea wasn't good. I think that just like everything in today's world, Evan, and boy, do I sound old now. Like, just the expectations are just way too early for these things to mature, right? I mean, just way, way too early. So like you see the indicators, you see things happening. There will be a breakthrough moment. I'm not sure what that is. There were these flashes of fantastic dynamics. Remember when the Constitution DAO was created, and there was the bidding for the Constitution and all that. We had a bunch of people on our team participate in that. Like, there were these flashes of like purely democratized action that moved with such velocity and could really create interesting social impact, right? And there's a number of other, areas about it. Those things are really what makes blockchain overall super fun, right? Like, that's the part that just makes it, not just another day job involving infrastructure and flashing lights and financial institutions that pay the bills. Yeah.
So for you guys, what are your primary focuses chain-wise? Is this we're building it for everybody, or are you starting with a few and proving that it works? Does this mean that you're focusing on institutions, trying to get them across? Where's kind of your focus target?
Yeah, we're touching everything. I think the short answer is we're going to touch everything. We're going to try everything. We're going to try to get on every test net, every dev net, and we continually have to have at least some familiarity in all the chains. Now, whether it's economically rational to begin to work with those chains is a different subject, and where you have to put real resource with people and hardware and networks and things. So, for us, obviously we focus where the institutions want to be, because we're basically serving them. Whether that is a trader or whether that is, just someone who's looking to stake. Those are philosophically, there have been lots of chains that have come and gone that really were unique and had something special. It just couldn't get moving. But it's informed our worldview, and it's informed how we may be working with other chains in other places. So we refuse to sort of stay still and just go, hey, let's just get a Solana validator up and sit back and cash the checks. That's just not the way we operate. So I don't know, Rich, if you think, beyond that, but I think that's really philosophically where we live.
No, I'd say one of the things that we did, and one of the things that we talk about with the custodians, that we're integrated with, is the breadth of coverage that we bring, and partially that's partially out of necessity, like, because we started the world after the guys who are really big, the handful of names that many know. We had to show real robust capabilities, and when you're not deep, you have to show you're wide, right? So we were able to show that we were very wide, and we were able to manage 50 plus chains, and we've sort of demonstrated that capability, demonstrated the capacity, and that serves as a proxy to sophistication. Then when you check the other boxes, like, oh, okay, these guys are serious, they're just newer, right? That's a battle that we fought last year. And I think with some success, and now it's a matter of, this is an aside, you didn't really ask this question, but I love being in an industry and in a market where it's not winner take all. Like we're not, we don't have to win everything. We don't want to win everything. In fact, blockchain does not work if one party wins everything, right? We're working with a number of companies who others perceive as our competitors, to try to create solutions that really serve enterprises for what they need, with sort of true diversity and other solutions. And that's the way this is going to grow. It is very analogous to the world of telecom. One party does not terminate a long distance minute from Kansas City, Missouri, all the way to Adelaide, Australia. Like, there's probably 5 or 6 operators in the mix between here and there, right? And so similarly, we're taking that mindset to the world. It's still super early days. You got to bring something different to the table. You got to be able to work with the other kids around the table, right? And be grateful for what you can get, and figure out how to survive and, navigate through this world. And eventually, I think what's going to happen is this is a pie growing exercise, right? This ecosystem, these crypto ecosystems have to get bigger. Nobody's going to win if the crypto world stays its current size. Like that's just sort of not going to serve anyone very well. And so our belief is that what we're solving for is the world where it's, transaction volumes are not 10x where they are today, but where they're 1,000x where they are today, right? Like that's, or 10,000x where they are today. That's the world that you have to solve for. That's why protocols like Solana, like their vision is fantastic, right? They're thinking way down the road. They're trying to solve really, really big problems. There's lots of challenges between here to there, right? And they'll be the first to acknowledge that in many different ways. But I think that it's fun to be in that kind of, design space, and it's fun to be, working with other providers who are trying to serve customers and provide solutions there. At the end of the day, that's what you have to do. You're not going to win by being the smartest in the room. You're going to win by making your customers the happiest, period. Like that's always true, right? Jeff Bezos, whatever, he's the one with that quote. That's true in any industry.
Mm-hmm. I was speaking to a data center guy yesterday. He was saying that with the growth and really proliferation, but also growth of AI, it is just eating up all the data center space, compute power, energy, like actual power. How are you finding that in terms of getting physical materials for growth for you?
It's a real constraint, and it is a massive opportunity. I mean, Tom, you can talk about that a little bit. Like we do have a foot in the water around this stuff. I'll tee Tom up with we had a decision about a year ago whether to go headlong into big AI infrastructure, and we concluded not to. I think we're happy with our decision. Simply because we see the world of AI sort of bifurcating into two different approaches. I mean, from our vantage point, from an infrastructure provider standpoint, maybe Tom, you can describe that with more eloquence.
For sure. I think you're looking at big AI and small AI, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah, good.
And that is, you've got big cloud, where you can have anything you'd like as long as it's an H200. And you know what I mean? That's there's no matching of the hardware to the workload. And workloads, and the software, again, back to it requires tuning of the hardware to that specific workload. And there is no reason to spend $375,000 on an 8x H200 server to do 90% of the stuff that's required to run the latest bot or the latest automation that you're going to be doing. You don't need that. You want to tune your hardware to your software and to your workloads. And so we stepped back and are huge believers in the intersection of AI and crypto. Like, no newsflash there, right? So we feel like the most important thing that we could do was, let's really understand the customer needs. Let's sit out the space race and focus on what the end users are going to need. And this is sort of my same thesis about what's going to grow crypto. It's just that UI for crypto sucks. It just does, right?
Yeah.
So we all talk about wanting to grow the pie, but it's just a bunch of bros talking to each other and like in a big circle right now. And the only way we're all going to be successful is if we take that leap and really think with some Web 2 principles. And Rich and I, having built a couple of Web 2 companies, know what those principles are and want to bring that into the Web 3 space. It's like, no, you want to make on-ramps easy. You want to make utilizing this advanced technology simple. And it's the same way with AI as it is with crypto, is that, you having easy access, ease of use, simplicity, it will drive adoption, and that adoption grows the pie, pretty simply.
It's fascinating. So some of, Tom and I are old enough to have some of our friends are, CEOs of sizable, notable companies, right? That have real R&D budgets and that are investing money. All of them have AI experiments. None of them, with only a handful of big tech company exceptions, are spending huge amounts of money on their AI infrastructure initiatives. They're finding tools that help improve their workflows. They're trying to figure out how to get customer service. They're working in applications like that. But the truth is the shortfall in AI right now is matching a customer need, an enterprise customer need, maybe one step below the galactic enterprises, right? Let's set aside the Grok, the X's of the world and the Facebooks of the world. Like they're nation states when it comes to this stuff, right? But when you move down to the $400 million publicly traded company that has an R&D budget that's consequential, but it matters and they have to pay attention to their bottom line profit, they are not flooding hundreds of thousands of dollars as an experiment over a long period of time into AI. They're trying to find solutions. And so we think that there's sort of a unique capability to serve those customers, be able to speak to things like AI agents and how crypto matches this world, be able to speak to the stuff Tom talks about. Like, look, you don't need an H200 for that. You could do that on, a plain vanilla. You could do that on an A40, like some old, like there's conversations like that just do not happen, right? And part of the reason they don't happen is that the largest providers, they need to fill up their space, right? They need to sell, the stuff they have. So this world, I think, is coming to us. The decentralized providers, like the great protocols like Akash and others, have a role to play in that. But they too, I look at them as different versions of the gigantic cloud providers. They're decentralized, but what they're doing is they're just providing a big pile of stuff. The solutions are going to be the people, I think, who can come to the table and say, hey, look, I can figure out how to work it. You have a particularly sensitive workload. You want that to be managed on premise. You want to make sure that you know where the physical compute is performed. You want to make sure you know that, it's secure. You want to make sure that you know exactly what's happening. But this you could do, XYZ workload, you could do through, Akash or one of the other decentralized providers just as well, because it's not sensitive. It has a different set of requirements, et cetera. That kind of solution solving, I think, is where we're going in AI. And it does require power. It does require, these different data center configurations. I think that the modern data center was not built for the power and cooling requirements of AI in particular. So there is some retooling. But I think that
solve your cooling issues.
What's that?
Like Tommy mentioned before, having data centers in space, does that solve the cooling issue or?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that's why people are doing it. I don't know anything about
one of the biggest reasons for sure. And but to drive home what Rich was just saying, all the hyperscalers have programs where come in, we'll give you some free stuff, and then we'll work from there. And then you'll sign a contract after you've proven your workload works great with us. In excess of 90% of the workloads that start in Web 2 end in a contract for an AWS. Yeah. Somewhere around 20% of AI workloads end in a contract. So it gives you an idea of the economic dislocation that exists between the product offering and the need.
If you're a team that's had this conversation internally, please call us. Well, we've spent all of our AWS credits. What are we going to do now? That's the conversation that we hear again and again and again.
Those are the conversations I'm having every day. That's for sure. Yep.
What are you most looking forward to for the rest of 2025, for GlobalStake specifically?
I think recognition. We took a very Web 2 approach to building sales channels, durable partnerships, building partnerships with, the gateway to institutions is through qualified custodians, right? We worked very hard over a long period of time. One of our team members did a fantastic job over more than a year and a half. And then the technical team did a great job over a year and a half minus a month, to create these integrations. I think that, the insertion of just sort of a mature, modern sales channel approach to the world where you're building an ecosystem of partners where there's, it's not a zero-sum game. Our economics do not mean someone else doesn't get economics. It's about, building a network of relationships that can grow over time. And obviously, everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants to, build and capture value, et cetera. But durability of these kinds of ecosystems is going to require, thinking about, well, if if my economics don't afford the other guy to get enough economics, then he's going to not be working for me in the future or working with me or trying to find somebody else, right? And we want to be that partner that everyone's like, including our competitors, are like, look, these guys are very fair, they're smart, they're doing something different. We want them to be part of our world. And I think that's what we will, that's what I'd love to see over the course of this year, right? Tom, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I think that's right. I think we want to bring to 25 the awareness and discipline of what it takes to be truly institutional, because there's a lot that word gets thrown around a lot, and it means nothing to many people. They just put it in as an adjective, whereas it's an ethos for us, right? It's completely different. And so I'm looking forward to 25 to having people really have an understanding of what institutional means. And I think that's coming very quickly, because we're having conversations that people are like, oh, you're kidding. Wait, you do that? Right? Those kinds of things then that indicate that the lights are turning on, real institutions are entering now. And so I think it heralds for our industry in a big way. And it's really positive, because once that kind of capital starts flowing and moving inside the ecosystems, Web3 grows, and it grows big, it grows fast, and it benefits all of us. It's going to be great.
And I'm eager to see some of these high throughput chains get to mainnet and get out, right? And they just, because they're exciting, period, right, for crypto generally, and they're going to bring some new solutions and new opportunities. But also, I think that they're going to give our mode of operation an opportunity to shine, like, because we will have just the capacity to maneuver that others don't have. There are parts of the other, the world is framed in certainly the world of staking infrastructure. Most protocol teams start with, well, when you connect to AWS, do this, this, and this, right? Like, that's the way most things start, right? And we're like, well, hold on, that's not us, right? So we need to do these things, and we have different security issues. And do we need to open this port so you can see it? Because, if you have set up an AWS, you don't need to have, we deal with issues that make us a little bit of an outlier sometimes. But I think that what's beginning to happen is, protocol teams are beginning to recognize that this makes a difference. Certainly traders and institutions recognize it makes a difference. And I think that just the evolution of the dialogue will allow us to, be able to provide some solutions, including with partners, including with competitor partners, in some cases that, others just don't have the bearing to handle.
Yeah, it's a good vision for the future, actually. I'm looking forward to that 2025 also. People want to find out more about GlobalStake. Firstly, who should be giving you a call or getting in touch, and how would they do that?
So look, we'd love to hear from anybody, anybody from small to large that's looking for, to stake on an enterprise basis, right? That cares about these things, small meaning small funds, as well as we do traders that are looking for bespoke solutions. Many traders are starting to build their own solutions to try to get better visibility into mempool, et cetera, and running their own nodes to do that and incurring big costs at AWS. We have snap to fit solutions for those kinds of things, and protocol teams that are just looking to diversify their operator set and bring something a little bit different to the mix. Certainly love to hear from all of them. And maybe the final point is that we believe that we are in the front lines of sort of this matching between AI infrastructure, storage infrastructure, which is an overlooked piece of the puzzle. AI generates massive amounts of data storage. We actually work pretty closely with the Arweave team, which is grappling with these issues today. And data, I think storage, while it's super boring, to most people, it's going to be a primitive that is absolutely critical to the success of blockchain and of AI. Look, if what you're doing is something beyond running a home Ethereum node, like we want we want to talk. We encourage you to run your home Ethereum node, by the way. But
I was just going to say, absolutely. Run your home Ethereum node, please. And exchange traded funds, we're starting to make a splash in as well. I think the ETF providers is a place where we're getting hurt. So they want this kind of regulatory compliance that we offer.
Where's the best place to connect online? Tom, you're not on Twitter or just not on crypto Twitter?
I am actually hidden quite well with grip.
No, but I mean, certainly through the website, globalstake.io is a great place to get. We have a pretty decent amount of traffic on LinkedIn. We do have, and then our head of protocol relations and our head of institutional relationships, they're pretty visible, online and in Telegram. Boy, it's hard to figure out where to communicate today, right? Is it, Telegram, Slack, Discord? We cover all of them, but I'd say that we, as much as I hate to admit it, look, we are from the LinkedIn generation. Sorry. Other guys. I hate to admit that. I really want to be a Telegram guy, and I do have it. But yeah, that's our crossover.
Yeah, hard pass. Thanks.
Well, Rich, Tom, thank you for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. Appreciate your insights, and the fact you're actually building something that's materially going to help the whole ecosystem. So, Godspeed with building and growing.
And Don, thanks for everything you do for the community. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Getting our message out, and the messages you do get out is fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Off Chain. We love bringing you great guests like Richard and Thomas, and hope we've inspired you to learn more about Web3, about bare metal, about the future, about technology generally, and how you might be a part of building the future. Please like, subscribe, or better yet, share this episode with a friend and help us spread the word. And join us again next week for another exciting episode of Off Chain. Till then, take care.